a look at this and get a reaction.
Degree remains to be seen. The board will review the sheriff's answers in an executive session in a few weeks. For more, we're joined by Dr. Matthew Hines, Vice Chair for the Pima County Board of Supervisors. Matthew, it's great to have you. Did he refuse to answer the questions about disciplinary action that was taken against him at the El Paso Police Department?
It certainly seems pretty problematic to me. I mean, I've reviewed his responses with my team, with some other lawyers as well, and I'm certainly not satisfied with these responses. And what he did in El Paso, I mean, one of the things he was suspended for, 37 days of suspension in El Paso. 15 of those days occurred after he beat almost to death a handcuffed robbery suspect who was in the back of a squad car with a flashlight. He's a bad cop. He made really bad decisions and then lied about his past to convince then Pima County officials to hire him back in 1984. He also lied about that gap in time. He used to say 1982, so that got changed. Mm-hmm. But the point here is this man, we shouldn't even know his name. We should not know the name Nanos. He has perpetrated a fraud for 4 decades upon my community, and it is, frankly, it's shameful and insulting to the 1,500 men and women of that amazing law enforcement agency that he heads currently. Every day he walks in the door.
That story of beating a suspect who was handcuffed with a flashlight until you say beat him nearly to death. Were there charges filed? I mean, that would certainly seem to call for some criminal charges.
So naive.
I don't look. The El Paso Police Department was sued over this matter, and eventually that was one of the things that led the El Paso Police Department to force him to resign in lieu of termination. That woman was put in the ICU for days, and there were multiple news stories about that at the time when it happened.
What do you make? I mean, he is saying, look, whatever I did or didn't do decades ago has nothing to do with how I'm leading the Guthrie investigation and how I'm currently serving as sheriff of Pima County. You clearly don't buy that.
Not at all. Look, these actions are incredibly significant. The fact that he came to Pima County and the first official act that he did here was to lie about his history, and that's how he got peace officer certification. Nobody can be serving in law enforcement at any level in the state of Arizona unless they get peace officer certification, and he could not have possibly revealed that history to the board at the time that this happened, that he got a job. And that means he perpetrated a fraud for decades upon the people of my community.
He has handled the Nancy Guthrie investigation. As you know, there's been a lot of questions about how we handled the crime scene, how we handled the DNA evidence. What is your assessment?
So I'm a physician and a supervisor on the board. I am not in law enforcement, but I will say relationships in these kinds of situations matter and time matters. And I say that because it is pretty clear that his past run-ins with the Federal Bureau of Investigation back in 2015, when he was almost indicted for RICO charges at the time, which they did not end up going forward with, he has held a grudge against the FBI and refused to fully work with them going forward. And I think we see examples of the results of that with regard to the most recent high-profile investigation.
And perhaps maybe jeopardized elements of that, do you think? Yes or no?
Very possible.
Matthew Hines, keep us posted. Very important what you're saying. Thank you.
All right.
That's some good context.
Yeah, it's I'm definitely wearing the same thing. At least as I was in that interview. So
yeah.
I know that was hours ago. So
off the national media, we have Matt Hines joining us today to talk about Sheriff Nanos and the ongoing controversy, not about the Guthrie case,
it really
at least not specifically. Really about what he's done here locally with the Board of Supervisors, and and at this point now they've given interrogatories to Sheriff Nanos and directed him that he must answer these questions under oath or be subject to discipline by the Board of Supervisors. Is there any problem ab initio just from the beginning with the responses that you got in the letter that Sheriff Nanos sent in response to your questions?
Sure. I mean, he was substantively responsive, though I found a lot of the responses the tone was arrogant. Asserting the board didn't really have the authority to ask these questions in the way that we did, but he would go ahead and answer them anyway. Just truly, so I didn't really appreciate the tone. I think when we're asking why you threw your political opponent effectively on house arrest and told her under penalty of losing her job that for the next 3 weeks, you better go home, lady, and not talk or campaign or tell anyone that I just did this to you. That's pretty damning. We know he did that. We know the HR investigation into that situation made it very clear that he used resources from the county in his authority as sheriff to silence his political opponent. The kind of stuff Trump talks about doing, but actually hasn't done, right? But our own sheriff did. So this is, and his response to that set of questions, that compound question, I think it was item 3, was to just double down. He's trying to relitigate how awful Heather Lappin was. He drove her out of the county. She's up in Queen Creek now. Come on. So no, what he did to a political opponent is just, inexcusable. Obviously, in my opinion, it renders him unqualified. And frankly, it was crime. It was criminal activity. But all that said, as to the quality of the responses, we could talk about that for quite a while. But the one thing that we demanded, and this was central, right? Like lots of lies swirling around, lots of misrepresentations. I believe he lied under oath during a federal deposition. That could be a class 4 felony. Not great. This is the sheriff of the largest law enforcement agency in Southern Arizona and of course in Pima County. And these folks, all of us in government, need to be held to the absolute highest of standards. And I would say law enforcement elected officials, even higher standard. And here we are. So the reason the board took this very unusual step, I believe it's the second time in Pima County history, last time being in 1994, the reason we needed to take this step and compel responses under oath was because it was so difficult to figure out what the heck is accurate or not, because he's been implicated in many misstatements, inaccuracies, and that's just a nice way of saying lies. So the fact that he didn't turn in sworn responses kind of is a problem.
How so? What leads you to the belief that this is not sworn responses?
Because there's no attestation, and we gave him a lawyer. We gave him the board's paying for yet another outside council member to help him navigate this. So this wasn't like a trick question or a trick. We a little over 5 weeks ago, we made it clear to him we were going to ask him some questions. A little over 2 weeks ago, the board, in executive session mostly, wrote those questions, and then we made them public at the dais that day. And our attorney sent a letter to Sheriff Nanos and his attorney 2 weeks and 3 days ago saying, here are the questions we'd like you to answer. And in all of those communications, and in every time we made a motion at the public at the dais, we referred to Arizona Revised Statute 11-253, Section A. And that clearly says, it's in the first sentence of the statute, I might slightly misparaphrase it, but it basically says a county board of supervisors may require a county official to make reports under oath. Mm-hmm. That's in the statute. The board didn't add that. It's in the statute. That's why we cited it so many times in making the motions and then in the letters we sent to him and his lawyer. So the homework assignment was pretty simple. Answer us truthfully and swear to it, because we believe you, or we have trouble believing you because of so many other reports of inaccuracies and what you did to get a job here in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. So to not submit, and you've done this, I've done this, I, Matthew G. Hines, under penalty of perjury, do solemnly swear that the aforementioned XYZ on an application or on a loan or whatever, that everything to this point is true and accurate to the best of my ability to determine it. So under penalty of perjury, and you have to sign with a notary. That is the attestation. I can't imagine how his lawyer, again, this wasn't a trick. It was an open book test. We gave him a tutor / attorney, and still we didn't get sworn responses. So I don't even know if we're allowed, if he were to offer, I don't even know if we're allowed to accept anything past the statutory deadline. We already interpreted it pretty broadly. We did not make him come in 10 days after we voted. We stretched that. We decided that would mean 10 business days. So I think we gave him a little extra time there. It was more convenient for the board anyway. So we shall see. Next up, the board, have to decide largely in executive session if the responses he provided meet or comply with the statute as written. And if we don't think that they do, then we have to figure out what that means and what we can do next. And we need our attorneys to tell us what kind of actions we are able to take.
So I'm just want some clarification off of the letter that Nanos provided the board. The lawyer that the Board of Supervisors provided him, is this the Franz Goldberg Arnold LLP, or is that an entirely different firm?
The attorney for this particular matter between the sheriff and the Board of Supervisors, his counsel is James Cool, COO. I don't know if that I'm not sure about the firm name, but maybe he's one of the members of that firm.
Okay, because I just was curious if the one who decided to not have him testify under oath was the one the county paid for, because that seems like a pretty silly elementary mistake. But I'm no lawyer.
We didn't even notice it at first because we were again. I mean, he kind of turned in his homework a little late, right?
Yes, yeah.
He didn't do it, and I feel like that was an FU to the board. I get it. He's a prideful, arrogant man. Fine, but really 2:03 p.m. in the middle of a almost 7-hour board meeting. We're not going to be able to actually meaningfully review your responses, man. Come on. I mean, I'm sure this was done last week sometime, and he chose to delay until literally an hour or hour and a half before the end of a board meeting. I guess technically you would have until midnight on Tuesday. We didn't say a time. But I think most people would have expected something before close of business, which we did get barely. And yeah, I was really astonished and baffled by this. Like, why? You didn't sign it. You didn't sign it and swear it, right? And we did
at the very beginning. It says, the attorney is writing this, and he says, "I've consulted extensively with Sheriff Nanos about the topics raised in your letter, and I'm authorized to provide the following responses on his behalf." So it's not even the sheriff saying this. I mean, in the actual answers itself, the attorney actually says, "I'm saying this." The attorney, not Sheriff Nanos, several times. So it seems to me that this is not attested. I mean, it's not an affidavit. It's not under penalty of perjury, and that's kind of the requirement of the statute.
It is precisely the requirement of the statute. That's why I was kind of stunned. And that was pointed out to me, by the way. I did not notice it myself because we were conducting a board meeting and actually talking about a ton of different things at the time. So it was later in the evening or the next day, maybe. Yeah, it was later that evening that I had actually someone from a journalist mentioned it, and then a couple of attorneys reached out, and then I reached out to it. So I've talked to 3 attorneys. I've talked to a judge privately, and several members of the media the following couple of days, who all were like, "Wait, doesn't this statute mean that this has to be under oath? It has to be sworn in some fashion?" I said, "Of course it does." I mean, with all he's all over the place. We don't know what's true or not. This is absolutely central. It's not like it'd be nice if. It's required. And the way you do that, obviously he chose, and again, 4 extra days, got paid for an attorney for you to do it, right? The board, here are the questions, you knew about them. You knew about this happening 5 weeks ahead of time. You knew the specific questions 2 weeks ahead of time. We give you a lawyer, we give you extra time. This wasn't any sort of trick that we referenced the statute a dozen times in talking about this. So we'll see. And clearly, he also was given the choice. He, like Justin Heap, Recorder Heap up in Maricopa County. This just happened a couple months ago. Yeah. The board compelled him to come testify within 10 days. He did so. It was within 7, I think. They set a special meeting. I think it was a special meeting on a Wednesday. And then Recorder Heap showed up, sworn in, and testified. That's how you do it verbally in person. And if if you would prefer to have your responses, and in light of how he performs in front of the cameras, I think that was a very smart decision on his part and on the part of his attorney. I think it's easy to kind of get tripped up, and so especially for him, as I've seen. So that's fine that he wants to do it in writing, and that was perfectly lawful. But to make something under oath in writing, you need to have some kind of attestation that's notarized.
Yeah. Yeah, as a former prosecutor and defense attorney myself, this smacks to me of like kind of daring you to go further, to take the next step, to testing your resolve, essentially.
Why? He's 72, has a nearly $1 million home, retired once before in 2016 when the voters did not want to have him continue in the capacity of sheriff back then. He's very much eligible for retirement. It's so frustrating, as you heard on that news story, and I'll repeat it. Like, I cannot even imagine being one of the 1,500 law enforcement folks that he's in command of right now. Like, to know that the head law enforcement agent is not even truly qualified to be practicing, to be doing that career, and that he used fraud, misinformation, lies, whatever you want to call them, to get to weasel his way into a job 4 decades ago, and has been just lucky. Bad cop gets lucky.
Well, let's drill down on some of the specific topics. Mm-hmm. First of all, topic number one is his employment history, mm-hmm. And his lawyer alleges essentially
nothing to see here,
outside the scope.
That's outside our scope. And go back to the statute. And I don't know if you have it in front of you. I don't have a copy right in front of it. It is so the Board of Supervisors may require a county officer to make reports under oath as mm-hmm. to the duties of their office from time to time, or something to that effect. So I absolutely believe that your work history, whether you were qualified or not qualified to do the work, how you got your job, I mean, absolutely that's relevant to him being the sheriff and to him continuing in any capacity in law enforcement. And if you have a different opinion, I'm interested to hear it, but that I don't understand how he or his attorney would interpret the statute to mean that we can't ask him about his qualifications for being here or how he got there.
Yeah, that is crazy, but it seems like the lawyer is kind of egging on for a judge to get involved to determine the scope of 11-253.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it myself. Yeah,
but that doesn't seem like something that I wouldn't want that.
Well, yeah, if you don't want that, then it's a game of chicken.
Well, no, I mean, if I were him, I wouldn't want that because, is this really how you want to leave? I don't know. I mean, and I was thinking maybe there are some either non-answers or partial answers, or there's some problematic answers. I think there are some inaccuracies in his 22 pages of responses as well. I'm still going through some of them, but if this is a sworn document, then there's another problem, right? Because then you have 2, 3, 4, 5, half a dozen potential class 4 felonies coming at you. If you swear to a bunch of stuff that is not true, then you have our head law enforcement officer lying under oath.
Because I'm kind of a humorous person. I would like to show everybody what his resume looks like, because it struck me, just the appearance of it alone struck me as kind of weird. Let me go ahead and share my screen here real quick, and I'll show people what I'm talking about. This here, let me see if I can zoom in on that a little bit.
Gotta love the marital status and the religion. I don't think I've ever seen that on a resume.
And the font, oh my God. I would not hire somebody based on their resume just on this choice of font alone, given it's 1984, so things were a little bit different. But oh my God, what is with this font? It's just so bizarre.
Well, how is this produced?
It looks like it's typed, but with a font to make it look like it's handwritten.
Yeah, it looks like it was done in Word in 1984, and they chose like the weirdest font they could possibly choose. It's so bizarre. A professional resume written in, I don't know, elegant handwriting or some kind of fun. Anyways, that struck me as really, really kind of bizarre.
The 80s was a weird time way back when.
Yeah, no doubt. So he does provide some additional responses on topic number one, but essentially he's saying that you guys don't get to judge that. You guys don't get to judge how I got the job or my employment history or, whether I lied on my application. That's just not part of my duties. So it's not something that you can inquire into as his basic response. Topic number two is the Lappin and Cross disciplinary action.
Before we get to that one, the first topic does mention the whole disposition issue, and it kind of has a weak response of, oh, I thought we were just talking about Pima County, not my entire work history. That's why I said I haven't been suspended. Is that like a good...
I've not been suspended in a place I haven't worked before, so yeah, we're good.
I that seems too cute by half. He was asked by an attorney under oath in his capacity and his career history as a law enforcement officer, not specific to any geographic region or any specific agency. He was asked, have you been suspended in your capacity, your time in law enforcement? That was the context. It was very clear. You've seen the depositions, that section of the deposition. And they were talking about and he said, no, it was not. Well, do you mean in Arizona? No, if he knew this, you think he didn't remember being drummed out of a police force after beating the living snot out of a person who was in handcuffs and nearly killing him with a flashlight, putting him in the ICU? That just kind of slipped his mind. The details.
I mean, he is 70 years old. Maybe it did slip his mind.
I hope that's I refuse to believe that. I think that's pretty insulting of him to think that the lawyers did not mean, have you ever had disciplinary actions that rose to the level of a suspension? Not just at Pima County, not just at TP, not just in here, but period. And by the way, if he wants to correct his deposition, that can be done. There is a process. He has a whole different group of lawyers helping him with these federal cases. He's costing us a lot of money because he keeps getting us sued. But yeah, he has an attorney specifically helping him with these other cases. And this was the Aaron Cross situation, if indeed he would like to modify that response so that he hasn't committed perjury about his work history, I strongly recommend to the sheriff that he contact his counsel, which could have been done weeks and weeks ago when this all came forward, by the way. It has not happened in 2 months. And that can be, there's a formal process to actually amend that and say, hey, please add the following to my deposition to correct or amend this thing. I was referring to my time practicing law, and practicing law is wrong, but being a law enforcement in the state of Arizona and in Pima County. I was not responding based on any other law enforcement, work experience. That would at least make it not perjury. That'd be good.
Speaking of the number of lawsuits that he's engaged in right now, do you have any kind of handle on how much this litigation has cost the county and county taxpayers thus far?
Oh, it's hundreds of thousands. I shouldn't say that because I don't have the exact number. Just the situation between, with the board and the sheriff, that's tens of thousands of dollars because we have outside counsel. He has a different outside counsel. Hell, the county attorney now has outside counsel. It's just sort of like, it's kind of crazy. There are, there's the rape investigation that I believe he botched that to help his friend, the rapist, get away with less time imprisoned. All right. That's what happened. So I think that civil suit is paused or settled or something. I can't quite remember. And there are 2 other federal lawsuits going on with regard to the situation with Lieutenant Heather Lappin, or former Lieutenant Heather Lappin, because she's left, and also Sergeant Cross. So that's 1, 2, 3. All sorts of things that came from the insane number of jail deaths from in 21, 22, and 23. I'm sure we're still going through some of those. And then, of course, the ongoing matters. So, yeah, there are, we do keep, and ACLU. That's a big one, really big one, seeing what the ACLU said in their most recent filing. that is, that's why we asked about that as well. And
I've got a nugget from his response, or his lawyer's responses rather, about that one. But in this one, I want to note that he says, his lawyer says, before responding substantively, I must note, and this is the lawyer talking, both Sergeant Cross and former Lieutenant Lappin have filed lawsuits against the sheriff in connection with the discipline they received following sustained findings of misconduct. Both lawsuits are ongoing. Because this topic touches on active litigation against the county, any discussion about it should take place in executive session. Now, number one, is that true to your best understanding? And what is your understanding about being under oath and being on the record in executive session? Is that even possible?
I don't know how you do that, because we're looking for public accountability here. That's what the statute is trying to help us get at, right? So if we just say, all right, don't worry, everyone, we're going to take some testimony behind closed doors and then never tell you about it, that doesn't accomplish anything at all, does it? I guess it might.
Just to be clear, minutes aren't taken in executive session. Only the decisions are recorded. There's no minutes of testimony during executive session.
We do keep minutes, and we do record executive sessions. That is kept under lock and key, probably by the clerk. So it has to, and anything that we do as a public board, we do have to keep track of. Even the stuff that we're talking about behind closed doors, all of that is recorded electronically, and there are transcripts and all that.
Now, is that just a default decision not to release that to the public? Can the board, if they agree to do so, if they vote to do so, can they release the minutes of that executive session?
Oh no, the executive session is specifically protected under open meeting law and the statute. So that wouldn't be something like, I can't talk about specific things that were discussed, or at least specific, I can't say. And then Rex Scott said, I don't really think so. No, I can't be, you can't be revealing the specific conversations that occur in executive sessions under penalty of.
Well, in essence, his attorney is saying, we're not going to talk on the record about this.
I know what he was saying. It's exactly what he wants to say, that we shouldn't talk about this at all. I don't think that that is a non-substantive response. But he went on to relitigate everything against Heather Lappin. So that made it a substantive response. But if he had just left it at, we're not going to talk about this unless we can do it in an executive session, he doesn't get to use, like some form of the Fifth Amendment or something. These are civil cases. He's getting himself and the county sued because he abused his authority, which our own human resources investigation final decision clearly stated he did that. Absolutely did it.
Reading over this, I mean, the recounting that he makes here is just simply his own previous testimony as to his self-serving statements about what happened during the disciplinary process of those officers or those deputies.
Yep, exactly. It's all very, it's disturbingly similar and parallel to things that we hear and see from the president. I hate to keep saying that, but I mean, I am highly allergic to public corruption, abuse of authority by an elected or appointed government official, incompetence, also highly allergic to that. And he kind of checks all those boxes. And this is, again, I've said it multiple times. I don't know why he thinks it's okay for him to continue in office. Go have a good time, or just keep pushing it. If somehow we get some legal opinions that tell us, okay, if he wants to submit, say, something to make this sworn, then you've got some other problems. We have to decide, is his response, adequate? But then without and then potentially with a sworn statement, okay. But now it seems like you might be swearing to some things that are not accurate. So that puts us in the realm of perjury again. And so what are you doing? Why are you putting your pension at risk? We all know since 2010, when I was actually in the legislature, I need to look up and see how I voted on this. If you are part of EORP, that's for elected officials, or ASRS or PSPRS, the retirement systems for government employees in the state of Arizona, and you are convicted of a class 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 felony, class 6 being the lowest, doesn't rise to that level. But if you're convicted of any of those class 1 through class 5 felonies related to the discharge of your duties as a government employee, right? So obviously check that box. So yes, if that happens, you are ineligible for membership in that particular program, which means goodbye pension. It's forfeited. And maybe a lump sum of what you put into it up till I think 2010 or something. Maybe you get some of that back. I don't know, but you don't get anything from the state. You don't get anything. It's gone. And so why are you messing with this? 72, retired once before, like just this makes no
He
sense.
seems to really like the position. It seems like he wants to fight this. At least the tone his lawyer gave made it seem that way, that he wants to stay in office.
Sure. I mean, he's peacocking all over the place. I mean, he's really good at it. He's not really good at being a sheriff, but he's really good at absorbing and holding attention like that. That's I guess it's his call here. I just don't think it makes any sense. And it's nice to be recognized when you walk into a restaurant with your family and you have your lawn or whatever. That's cool. That's great. I will tell you, a very nice cashier at Walgreens when I was getting my prescriptions, and then I had to grab some bad stuff like a soda and some junk food from the front, and like I was kind of dressed a little bit like this, and she said, "How long have you been elected?" Like, oh, like, I wasn't in scrubs or anything. So, and we had a nice little conversation. Nice to meet you. Those are nice experiences. I get that. But that is not a reason to continue to like force yourself onto this community or onto the 1,500 people that he currently, unfortunately, commands.
This might be a poor segue, but given that note, something that was missing from this topic too on disciplinary actions, and you mentioned it earlier, it seems like there was a third incident. Did the board not ask about his handling of the sexual assault allegations?
I'm trying to remember. We went through multiple versions of the questions which we ultimately sent to him, and I'm trying to remember exactly.
Yeah, no, that wasn't part of it.
Oh, wow.
What was that?
I don't think that was part of it, no.
Yeah, I think that might be true.
Yeah.
That is an interesting decision on part of the board.
Well, I mean, it was a very problematic situation, and remember, the AG has not had their final say. I don't know to say anything else, but my understanding from the Attorney General and from our outside counsel who helps kind of liaise with other law enforcement agencies, in this case the AG on our behalf with regard to the situation, they are still working on it, right? They saw the internal affairs investigation, and they're kind of going through that, and I don't know how far they're going to take that, if they're going to do like actual on the ground interviews and collect testimony, deposition style from the 8, 9, 10, 12 people who were involved. But pretty clearly, the department botched that investigation. They never should have kept it in house. That's just not what you do when two of your employees are in that kind of terrible situation. You have to go get like the Department of Public Safety or maybe TPD or another law enforcement agency to come in and do that from a much less potential for bias or conflict. So that was handled poorly, and I think just like so very much is handled poorly over there.
Could we talk about the deposition a little bit?
Yeah, we did earlier.
The allegation specifically, the federal deposition. Let me go ahead and show that to the folks.
Sure.
What I'm talking about.
This is the December deposition for the Aaron Cross lawsuit. I will point out, while Heather Lappin is suing the sheriff and the county for, I think she had initially asked for $2 million for what he did to her, taking away her constitutional rights, using the authority of the county and the dollars of the county to do so, plus I think legal fees. I believe Sergeant Cross is suing for $1. He's not trying to. This is I think he's suing for like $1 and like legal fees, but that's it. So this is someone who's trying to like make a point and call attention to serious problems going on with the sheriff.
Yeah. And what is it that is alleged that may be a misstatement or in fact, perjury in this particular document.
It's they're like 4 little pages per page. So it's like page 11. So I think you have to go to the next
here. Page 11.
Maybe it's 11 or 12. Okay. So see there where he talks about, have you ever received discipline as a law enforcement officer? There you go. Have you ever received discipline as a law enforcement officer? Not in Arizona or during your tenure in Pima County. Did you ever receive discipline? No, it is, have you ever received discipline as a law enforcement officer? Answer, he says yes. He admits that he had. What is the extent of discipline you received? Primarily, it would have been like, I'm not very good at driver. Okay, so I had a lot of car accidents. So, letter for this or documented verbal for that. I'm assuming like a letter.
That's the real killer here is, did you
ever receive a discipline that rose to the level of suspension? Answer, not qualified. No. Not in Arizona. Not in Pima County. Not in the last, 3 decades or 4 decades. It was just no. And that can be fixed. That can absolutely be fixed if there's something that happens all the time. So we've known that was a lie for 2 months now, and he hasn't corrected it with his attorney.
And this is referred to the United States Department of Justice for investigation, correct?
That is right.
And that would be this exhibit, which is the letter from the United States Attorney, Timothy Cochran, saying that he has no further update. A decision was made after consultation. There's no federal predicate for a criminal investigation.
So that's a little different. So that is actually a follow-up. That was not specific to the federal deposition, and it's so many moving parts. That is, we had not heard in writing from the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was under Biden back then in November of 2024, when the board voted unanimously to ask for help from the AG and from the U.S. Attorney for the District of Arizona. It was I think Restiano was the name of the U.S. attorney at the time. He called and I guess left a message or talked to someone, but there was no written response like this. So that's why a couple months ago, the county administrator, hey, are you all going to do anything here? And so that's with regard to the board referral from November of 2024. As to whether not the federal deposition rises to that was forwarded. I felt that the federal deposition looked like a class 4 felony to me. I referred that to the Attorney General's office myself. They mentioned that anything that occurs in a federal deposition due to case law is just by convention must stay. That is the purview of the federal courts. So yes, it looks like he committed a class 4 felony potentially during that deposition, but that goes to the federal courts, and it would be the U.S. attorney as to whether or not they find that is sufficiently problematic or material enough to warrant.
So this declination doesn't relate to that testimony that we just went over. It relates to something else that you referred to, the Attorney General's office, the U.S. Attorney General's office.
It refers to the lap and cross situation that we thought was extraordinarily problematic.
Same controversy, but a different aspect of it.
Same sheriff, same problems, but just a different specific problem in this case. Yeah.
All right, let me stop sharing that screen then. So I think now we can move on to the next subject number 3, that he responds to. And that's going to be the one that I think most people in Pima County and Arizona in general would be most general applicability to their own situation and their own lives and their own communities, which is coordination with federal immigration officials. Sure. Andrew, you have anything you want to lead off with on that topic?
Yeah, it just kind of seems like he ended the policy to keep track, and then or at least received the reports, and then they still kept track, and then he had them stop keeping track, which seems like not a great idea. We should be keeping track of when our officers contact federal agents. So
agreed. I mean, look, I was in the legislature as a House member during the whole Senate Bill 1070 thing. Voted no, obviously. Well, I shouldn't say that. You never know. But I did vote no on that. Bad law. And it is like mostly squashed by the courts. There's a little bit of it left over that is still there and that's enforceable. That said, the federal immigration enforcement is not the purview of local law enforcement. It just is not. And so to see some of the things we saw in the supplemental filing from the ACLU with regard to their own lawsuit against the sheriff's department filed, I think they originally filed back in June of 25, and the supplemental they filed, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks ago. Really concerning stuff. I keep coming back to the deputy that took a family to a Taco Bell.
Yeah.
And just kind of, not suspected of criminal activity. These were not, they weren't like robbing a bank or anything. They weren't stealing a car. It was just a family of, seems like, like Latino speaking Spanish. And there was an attempt to reach out to Border Patrol, which is strange because it's totally different. If you're taking somebody into custody because they just got busted trying to steal a car or whatever, or they're wanted for on suspicion of homicide, something like that. And while you're processing them, you realize, okay, you have an individual who's not lawfully that is a totally different situation. Then there are mechanisms to properly take care and adjudicate that. That's fine. But when people are not suspected of any kind of criminal activity, to be frankly bamboozled into hanging out long enough so that a Border Patrol, responder can come and take these people into custody, that is depriving them of their constitutional rights. And I don't know if he was aware of it, or is he doing it and telling the board and the public that they aren't doing it, or does he not know what his people are doing? I don't know which one is worse. Probably the second one, right? I guess lying to the board seems to be something and just lying in general seems to be something he's a great facility for doing already. So, but then assuring the public, assuring the Democrats that this is not my thing. We don't do this here in the sheriff's department, and to come to find out that, yeah, you do. Oh, you very much do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems to me like some of the responses that he have here are basically, I don't want to know about it if my deputies are out there doing essentially immigration enforcement. Yeah. He says that he mentions the public records lawsuit filed by the ACLU and claims to be working closely with them to locate and provide those public records, which seems kind of specious given that they've sued him about his lack of doing so.
Right.
He says that data compiled regarding those communications between sheriff's deputies and federal immigration officials was compiled by his predecessor, Sheriff Napier, into monthly summaries and then provided to Sheriff Napier. And once Sheriff Nanos took office, he instructed communications staff to stop providing those monthly reports to him, which they did. However, unbeknownst to Sheriff Nanos, staff continued to track the contents but did not provide him with summaries. When Sheriff Nanos learned that the department was still tracking contacts, he ordered the practice to be discontinued. Not that, necessarily he did anything to prevent those communications from happening between deputies and immigration enforcement, but that he just didn't want any record of it and he didn't want to have it communicated to him. And, this happened.
You were trying to do, just don't tell me about it.
Lawsuit, they filed the lawsuit and a week later, he tells his staff to no longer track those kind of contacts. That's
right, and that's not a great way to do it. Well, I don't know. Like, okay, that is just buffoonery. I mean, come on. This is serious stuff, man. Like, you're the sheriff for the moment, so like, what are you doing? Like, this is a privileged role. You have a trusted role and authority in this community that I think you kind of he bamboozled a lot of people into voting for you or into not voting for Heather Lappin last time, because little did we know that you've never truly been qualified to serve in law enforcement for 4 decades.
Which again, he won that race by only 500 votes. Or
481 votes, and out of like 500,000 votes cast. Come on. So did what he did to smear Heather Lappin I mean, you see the memo. He released a memo and a media advisory from Internal Affairs saying all this dastardly, like uncorroborated garbage about Heather Lappin, how she was violating the Hatch Act and all this stuff. And she was a first-time candidate. She was not doing any of those things, because he was upset that someone sort of dressed in similar colors, a couple, three folks who were supporting her on their off time or on a corner somewhere waving around a sign that said, like deputies for I think, I don't know, actually, I can't remember if it was deputies against Nanos or deputies for her, but whatever. That just pissed him off. So this is what bullies do, right? He used every possible authority and every possible lever he could pull to mess with his political opponent, to the point where he threatened to fire her if she didn't go home and stop campaigning and put out all this bullshit, put all of this bullshit into the universe 3 weeks before the votes were counted. And what happened was, I've said this multiple times, I have not talked to 481 people, but I've talked to 8, 10, 12 people at the time, and they made it very clear that this is Republicans, Democrats, and independents. They, for whatever reason, did not vote for Heather Lappin, and most of them cited that they didn't want to vote for Nanos either, but they didn't vote for her because of some of the concerning things they saw that she had been allegedly doing. That's the garbage he put out there during the campaign. That's the misinformation. And lo and behold, he, by doing that very act, is the one committing a crime. That's just the thing that makes your head kind of spin around. And bullies like this have to be held to account. The fact that he hasn't been held responsible for the lies, perpetrating a fraud on this community for however many 4 decades, that, I go back to the quote from February 3rd. Heck, I'm just not used to everybody hanging on my every word and holding me accountable for the things that I say. Wow. Like, truer words have perhaps never been spoken by a person. Like, he has not ever been held accountable for his entire time and history of career here in Pima County or in Arizona. And that's stopping now.
Absolutely. Returning to federal immigration, could the board require PCSD to keep track of such data?
It's so tricky with the row officers. If someone is maybe if it's in murder, but we control the purse, right? We give money to the various departments, including departments headed by elected officials, the recorder, the assessor, the treasurer, the sheriff, the county attorney, and those. So what we can't do is do we can't go in and say, hey, we want you to fire, and if you won't, we will fire one of your command staff because of that policy, because it's an elected official. You can't do that. You can't come in and fire my chief of staff because you don't like him or something he said, because that he works for an elected, same thing. So it's a little bit difficult. If it's a procedure type thing or a new board policy that pertains to data tracking management, I think we could certainly try that. If he says, no, I'm not going to do it and you can't make me, there may be some truth to that, because there's kind of a separation among the row officers and the board as to what we can and can't do. So it's not a simple answer.
Yeah, it seems like this is definitely a complicated situation because it's all local. And I mean, most people like myself, I know a lot about the powers of Congress versus the president, but the board of supervisors versus a sheriff, that's an entirely different realm. And so it is. Right?
And this has happened before, though. I mean, famously, Joe Arpaio at war with the Maricopa Board of Supervisors for years. Currently, I can't remember if it's county attorney or Cochise County supervisors are struggling with, I believe, their county attorney. The Pinal County supervisors, one of their people just stepped aside, one of their county officers, but there's a different county officer that they are at odds with. And I want to also say that I believe that to be their county attorney. So this is this is a difficult system, and it's because everybody's elected, and that the people choose someone, even when they're lied to and not given all the facts and the best information. And look at what the people did in 2016 when Sheriff Nanos was being when the FBI, as I mentioned in that recent broadcast, when the FBI was very seriously, very close to charging him with RICO charges until one of the guys who knew where all the, until somebody committed suicide and they lost their star witness, basically. But that whole situation, that was sufficiently public. People knew about that. And that made people very concerned about Nanos and whether or not he was corrupt and what was going on. And I know a charge or potential charges doesn't mean guilt, and we have to be very careful about that. But, where there's smoke, potentially there's fire. And because he was lucky and unfortunately someone lost his life and committed suicide, there wasn't a case to go forward. That doesn't mean that he didn't do anything wrong. But the people knew that information, and Sheriff Napier won. So, I mean, when the people are given, when the voters have the information, you know what? A heck of a lot of them look at it and they make a decision as a result. And that's what the voters were denied back in 2024 when he was competing against Heather Lappin. They were never, ever given accurate information and the truth about his own background, or about what he was accusing Lappin of was actually kind of what he was perpetrating, right? And that's really unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, back to immigration once again. Looking at the policies of the Pima County Sheriff's Office, the sheriff has promulgated rules regarding the arrest, detention, and transportation procedures under immigration-related issues. He says very clearly, department members shall not proactively pursue investigations regarding federal immigration law, and lists a lot of things about what they shouldn't inquire about, what they shouldn't do during their interactions with the public, basically to prevent them from basically becoming immigration enforcement officials. And so it's fair, I think, for him to say that he doesn't want his officers to do that. He has explicit rules in his general orders to not do that. But it strikes me, as, again, denying the public information to say, don't collect any information about such contacts because, I don't want anybody to know whether or not you're violating this policy. I think if he was serious about enforcing this policy, that he'd want information about any contacts so that he can follow up and check and make sure that his deputies are not violating his general orders.
Well,
how do you respond to that?
That would be a responsible thing to do, and I think an appropriate and transparent thing to do to assure the public that that's what's going on. But lots of smoke and mirrors here. Different group, different statements. I will say back, he was speaking to, this was in the past week or so, he was speaking to down in Green Valley, was telling folks about, he was giving I don't know, it felt like kind of like a state of the city or state of the state or kind of like an annual report thing from the sheriff's department to 50 or 60 folks assembled there in Green Valley. And, this came up, and like working with or not working with federal immigration came up, and to a probably more conservative leaning audience, he threw out some examples like, hey, if someone pulls a car over and 6 to 8 Hispanics get out, we probably have a situation there that I'm like, bro,
really,
stop talking. Like, people record stuff, right? So, I guess whichever that to me says he's very much thinking about immigration stuff, even if that's not what the purview is for local law enforcement. And he's a Democrat and has made public statements committing to this, and not having the data so he can pretend not to know what's going on. That is not the answer. That is absolutely completely inappropriate, and not knowing what you're.
I'd really love to have the sheriff on to talk about these matters. Obviously, he's not going to talk about it's under current litigation, but we'd love to talk to him.
Could the board order their own investigation of the incidents, like the Taco Bell incident, to try to figure out how often there are agents, deputies trying to reach out to immigration officials?
that is another. Again, it seems like I'm not trying to not answer you. I'm not sure. As I said, if it was something going on at HR, we could absolutely do an internal investigation. If it's something going on at the assessor's office or the county attorneys or the county sheriff, we have much more limited direct authority. Again, it's budget. Yeah, we are entirely the purse strings folks. But in terms of things going on there, I think that's more limiting. But if it's a department that's directly under us, then of course we could do that. But I'm not sure that we could do that with the sheriff. I would be certainly interested in exploring it though.
Because it seems just interesting if you can't, because then it would mean a sheriff could post a general order and then have his office violate the orders, and nobody would be able to investigate to see if he violated his own orders.
Well, I know we can do certain investigations, which, as we saw when Sergeant Cross and Lieutenant Lappin filed, well, like Lappin specifically, filed HR complaints, right? There was an outside firm that came in and partnered with human resources. We typically do those kinds of personnel complaints internally, but in this case, this was involving, I think she named 6 different people, including the sheriff. This was a bigger deal. This was, I think, nearly $50,000 investigation, which we used an outside firm to complete. Now that was something that was ordered pursuant to personnel policy with the county administration, so within county HR. So that certainly happens. I don't know if there is a similar process just for the board to say, okay, now let's figure this out. But so at least some investigations, yes, we can do.
Okay, because I'm just curious how often the Pima County deputies are reaching out to immigration and what all the different instances are. And it seems like ACLU is also interested in this.
We all are. And not telling people what's going on is really frustrating. I still don't understand how Nanos was ever hired in the first place. We saw the letter from El Paso saying, do not hire this guy. Seriously, run away. Didn't quite say that, but you get the impression that it was a disrecommendation, right? It was pretty close. And we know that El Paso keeps records forever. They're amazing. They they had everything they've ever sent Pima County about Nanos. I have not yet seen, I've seen 177 pages of a personnel file we keep centrally, but my request, which is now almost 7 weeks old, it was a bifurcated request. So one request went to central HR. We got that pretty fast, within a couple of weeks. The other request was, okay, each of the elected officials, assessor, treasurer, all of them, they have kind of their own satellite HR. And that's where the most up-to-date, most recently updated and compiled files are present, and also background history files. That's where you would find hey, how did this guy get peace officer certification? What did his application to become peace officer certified look like back in 1984? All of that would be in that file. What are the supporting documents that allowed for that to happen, et cetera? I can guarantee for you his disciplinary history from El Paso was not reviewed, because if it had been, he would never have been allowed to work as a correctional officer or anything at all. But that's a file that I still have. It's apparently 300 plus pages, and it's been pushing 7 weeks now. I've still not, and I'm a supervisor with an actual oversight role. I put in a public records request like anyone else would, but given my role, I did ask that to be expedited because there's, it should be, it's over a month and a half now. So it's apparently forthcoming. I don't know, but I want to know I want to see that application for post certification. I want to see, is there any evidence that anyone read the letter from the acting chief in El Paso? Why did we overrule and ignore it if we did? I was kind of hoping we just hadn't asked, because if we did ask and we got a response, and it is hard to write a letter like that saying you shouldn't hire someone. That's hard to do. I've had to almost do that a couple of times. It's really, really shitty. Excuse me. It's not. And every time I've had to do that, which is very infrequent, I've done my best. Hey, you should talk to someone else for a recommendation. I just, I don't think I could give you the kind of glowing one that I would want to. May I recommend this or that? But I would much rather not have to actually send a letter saying, yeah, this person is not rehireable, and thank God he's leaving. And like that was not something that was easy to do. And I respect the heck out of that acting chief for saying exactly what we needed to hear, which was poor attitude. This person should not be hired as a correctional officer due to his specifically to he resents authority, and obviously was fired. Well, was allowed to resign in lieu of termination for insubordination and what was it, consistent inefficiency? I think that's what it was. That's a lot, And I mean, we asked for it. Who read it? Do we ever read it? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out.
So you don't know who was involved in the hiring process at all back in the 1980s?
Yep. Well, we do know three of them in that 177 in the central HR file that I did get, and I did make that available to several members of the media. That's out there now publicly. So sorry for the noises. So he indeed, did have three interviewers who responded to his interview and wrote some very complimentary things, glowing remarks about his work history and all this and that. And it's pretty clear that the three gentlemen that interviewed him, I think they were all guys, could not have possibly seen that 3-page disciplinary record for 5 years. And
have you talked to them? Are they alive?
So lots of moving parts. I had thought about it. I was hoping before I did anything like that, I was hoping to get the most up-to-date file from Pima County Sheriff's Department, because if that's truly 300 pages and the one we have is 177, there's some more stuff, right? So I'd like to see, I mean, but that's a good point. I have not checked to see if they are alive or not. It was done in 1984.
So they could be like 80, potentially 70, 80.
Which isn't to say that we shouldn't, because I am truly fascinated, and I would like to know, like, if they ever saw this letter, or maybe did the letter just come in? Maybe we were desperate for correctional officers. It wasn't that big of a deal back in the 80s, and so he has law enforcement experience, and let's just slap a badge on him. Let's do it. But it's just weird to ask for feedback and then not read it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it is weird. All right. Do we want to move on to the topic number 4, the department's budget?
Absolutely. You last time we talked to you, you were pretty incensed about his budget overrides.
Every year.
Yeah. Every year. According to his accounting, he's only had budget overruns in 21, 22, and 24, and only by single digits, 1.5%, 1.75%, and 2.5%. And he actually claims at the end of this that he's more than made up for those overruns with the amount of departmental revenue he's returned to the county. He claims $46.4 million of surplus, which has been returned to the board. What do you say to that?
This man. Okay, so every year he was over by at least 7 figures, and we figured that out 2-3 months before the end of the fiscal year, and then we have to do some like fuzzy math, right? Then we internally have to shift things around so he's not insolvent. So his bragging about having all this extra money, that's awesome, because the county administrator, the board, our staff have to figure out how to fix it before we end the year, and he's like negative $3 million or something. So number one, he was over absolutely every budget cycle and in crisis, and at the last minute funds were transferred to prevent him from closing out the year in the negative, returning money to us. That is funny. So his budget was 142 million when I first came to the board in 2021 January, and every year I think I voted 8-9 different times to raise for raises to increase his budget. Is the largest subsection of Pima County's budget goes to his department. He's now at 190 million. It's actually 192, I think, is an upcoming budget now. So that's $50 million budget increase we've had to put in there, and a lot of that was forced on us because he kept going over and over and over. huge overtime stuff. And during COVID, I do understand that some of that was because a lot of people weren't able to or willing to work, and it was difficult to keep staff. And so he did have to pay a lot of overtime, but he also pads the heck out of his favorite people's retirements by giving them overtime, I think, excessively. And that's, he has a lot of people. The command staff love him to death. Why? Because every time they turn around, he's giving them some sort of like extra money. And what does that do? That puts the taxpayers of Pima County on the hook in perpetuity. Well, not in perpetuity. People don't live forever. But when these folks retire, they're not going to get this much. They're going to get that much every month. Or every year, because the sheriff is helping them to pad the heck out of their retirements. So he has a very devoted squad of people that are very, very committed to him and to the sheriff remaining the sheriff. Because without Sheriff Nanos, then they're not gonna get what they've been getting to this point. So, and that's just part of the cost overruns that we've seen every single year. But I would say, look, continuously just ignoring the budget we put forward for the sheriff, that's something, he's never used to being held accountable, right? His own words. So, well, that accountability is staying within your budget. Spend what we give you. Instead, he spends the first few years, it was 6, 7, 8, 9 million more that we had to like correct for. So yeah, I don't understand what he's talking about.
So if I'm understanding correctly, in his document, or the lawyer's document, that is, the budgeted expenditures for like FY21 is 159 million, but you're saying what Pima County actually budgeted for was less than that, but we had that the county had to readjust the budget amount at the last minute.
Yeah, because it wasn't that number. It was a lower number that we switched it to, right? So
okay.
That is how we can keep the department. And it wasn't only his department. I think for a couple of those years, there were some issues with the county attorney's budget as well, sometimes public defense services. So I'm not saying it's only him. Right now, I think it actually is. I know the Guthrie investigation, certainly, we did not use the FBI to the fullest extent possible, likely in part due to the fact that Nanos harbors an incredibly intense grudge against them for what they were investigating back in 2015. So, sending samples to labs in Florida instead of sending it to the FBI, which would be free and not charge the taxpayers anything, that was not something he was willing to do, as just one example of many. So that's going to cost a little bit of a cost overrun probably for the sheriff.
There's a theme that I'm noticing here with Nanos, and it does seem like he still resents authority. He doesn't like the FBI. He hasn't responded to your requests, and he had a lawyer answer. Yeah, it just seems like he still resents authority.
He does. He absolutely does. And he seems to resent even being asked to be accountable. Like, how dare we? Hey, man, you're a public office holder. Accountability is central to everything that we do. We cannot continue to allow trust to erode so severely. People do not trust government. They do not trust our government officials. It's some of the lowest numbers I've seen in terms of what people think of. It doesn't help with President Trump, frankly, existing and speaking. But so that certainly doesn't help us. But having someone who is so clearly and publicly disqualified and just shamefully, he should have been embarrassed out of office months ago when all this stuff started, especially the work history stuff that was initially reported by the Arizona Republic. How does he make eye contact with anybody at his office?
What's the next steps for Pima County and with Nanos? Like, are you guys going to look towards getting a court involved, trying to force him out, or are you going to start supporting the recall effort more and try to have it be a civic process? What's the next step?
So May 12th, as we saw in the last meeting on Tuesday, we did not have time to actually go through these responses. And then, to inform any kind of further action. So we simply said, we're going to talk about this again. We're going to talk about the meat of the responses, the quality of the responses and decide, do we accept these as meeting the statute or not? That's something we have to decide on. We'll talk about that in an executive session probably for a little while. Do these responses, do they meet the statute? If they don't meet the statute, and he's offering, do we accept any additional submissions? Can we legally? We have to ask our lawyers. Can we accept any more submissions? And then, based on these responses, what are, if any, what are our legal options? And it's so untested. We're going to rely on the attorneys. It might be nice to hear from the attorney general on some of this stuff. And it also comes down to a majority of the board. That's kind of what it comes down to. So it's not just me. I'm 1/5. It has to be, me plus 2 other people. So we shall see. We're gonna, as a board, continue to review this stuff, and then we can, just like the Democratic Party, we can do certain things. We can approve a resolution to say kind of whatever we want. So we could approve a resolution regardless of our ability to do anything like vacate the office, which I don't know if we can. He did respond, not sworn, but we'll see. Like at a minimum, we can respond based on what his answers were, and whether he did or didn't even fully did he really do the assignment, or the spirit of the assignment? I think the answer is no, and with regard to many of his responses, and we'll see what a majority of the board wants to do. We could approve a resolution saying we don't have a confidence in him, or urging him to step down, or whatever. Nothing that that's not vacating the office. That's the most severe situation. And like so the statute says, if the officer neglects to or refuses to submit those responses within the 10 days, then the board has the authority to vacate the office and replace the officer through the existing process and statute, which we've seen when other supervisors have left. And also when our county treasurer steps aside, same thing. We've never had this really happen in the state, so we're kind of in untested waters here, and so we're going to rely a lot on our counsel, probably multiple attorneys, and possibly the attorney general.
Understood.
One of the concerns I hear frequently is if you were to just get out the big cane and yank Sheriff Nanos off the stage, that we might end up with a Republican in that office. Who's perfectly fine having the deputies enforce immigration issues.
Now that wouldn't be good. And I honestly think, just putting on my political hat, letting someone just just stomp all over the Constitution, whether it's like inappropriately enforcing, detaining, or having his people detained, or asking not to know when his people unlawfully, unconstitutionally detain folks who may not be here legally. That's really bad. He's waving around the Democratic banner, but before he does, he's stomping all over it and is making it pretty muddy, right? It is not a good look. And he has, at least he's responded on, I think, Facebook comments. He's running for office in 2028 again. He's running for re-election, he said. Bonkers. So look, that is incredible. What I will guarantee for you is this: we have to, if he goes away, and I would really appreciate that, then we have to put a Democrat in. That's state law. If he doesn't go away and we can't remove him or do anything about it, and he's still here running for office in 2028, if he has the audacity to put his discredited, disqualified, incompetent butt on the ballot again, the Democrats will lose this seat. Absolutely.
If he's presumably somebody would challenge him for the nomination.
I hope so. I truly do. But and I know that's 2.5 years. That's a long time. That's a ways away. No, thank you. I'm not qualified. I acknowledge that I am not qualified to lead a law enforcement agency. I just wish that my Democratic colleague Sheriff Nanos would say the same and leave.
Sounds wild that he would want to run, especially in the Democrat sphere, where there's just already a bit of attention on running older folks in general for any office. But I mean, who knows how many people are interested in running for sheriff on the Democrat side.
That's true. And he would have a primary. It would be really interesting to see how that primary plays out. I just, the thing is being very obviously not particularly willing to really fully and perhaps truthfully answer questions from the board. How is he going to do it? How is he going to do this with the Democratic primary voters? And then, assuming he somehow gets through that primary in 28, how does he do that with the general electorate? If he's not willing to tell people what he's actually doing, what's happening in his department, he wants to, I mean, playing fast and loose with the truth, with his own personal truth, like his own. And yet, oh, nothing to see here. What he did in El Paso, it doesn't matter. Absolutely, it matters, because integrity, honesty, credibility, transparency, accountability, these are things that we not only expect, but we demand and deserve, especially from government officials and ones who are in law enforcement. We have to have that. So I don't see how that's going to work in 2028. And it doesn't make sense to me for him to continue to do this. This just seems gratuitous and really truly unnecessary.
Mm.
Well, we've had you on twice now on this subject, and it might give the impression that this is like your personal hobby horse. Are there other members of the Board of Supervisors who are kind of in step with you on this, and who you're in sync with on this behind the scenes?
I don't want to get tripped up into speaking for any other people. I will just simply point to some of the things that we've done. Meaning, while it was a 3-2 vote back in the end of 23 to refer the botched rape investigation and how that was conducted to the Attorney General, it was a 5-0 unanimous and bipartisan decision to refer his actions against Lappin and how he deprived her of her constitutional freedoms, including speech, with his power and authority of the county. That was a 5-0 vote. I will remind everyone that 5 weeks and 3 days ago, when the board came out of a very long executive session, we voted unanimously to hold him to attempt to hold him accountable and to initiate the 11-253 Section A just process. We voted unanimously to approve the questions that we asked him through our council. That was 2 weeks and 3 days ago now. So it is. I can't, again, I'm not going to speak for any of my colleagues, but I do think it's important to remind everyone what the vote was. This isn't like the Matt Hines show. I have no personal issue or vendetta with this dude. Like, I just am highly allergic to corruption and incompetence. And so I'm doing whatever I can to hold him accountable. And I'm going to keep doing it.
Well, if you ever want to come on and talk about the rail proposal that you recommended to the board that they shut down, we can definitely do that.
And you heard my colleague Andre say, Supervisor Kano, he even likes all 4 of the things I was trying to put on our legislative agenda. Just it seemed more of a process thing. It's something we, I guess, are supposed to do in July or August, and I just wanted to do it a little sooner because there's some federal congressional legislation going through the system that I believe we could get some money for a study and to kind of elevate a corridor from Nogales up to downtown Tucson. In addition to the part that goes from Phoenix down to Tucson, which is pretty well on its way to being it's almost ready to go, probably next couple of years. So, but yeah, so that I don't take that as a no. I take that as a not right now at this meeting, because they want time to look at it and they'd like to do all the legislative agenda type changes at the same time. So but we at least had a good conversation about it, and a couple of things that I suggested were in part informed by this struggle with the sheriff. The fact that elected constables and elected sheriffs in Arizona do not require any kind of certification, training, standards, nothing. That is wild. Most used to be or were at some point in law enforcement. So the vast majority of our sheriffs and sometimes even constables, they do have like post certification or could get it. But I believe that we need to seriously look at this. Might require, I don't know if this would be constitutional. We can make the attorney general be an attorney. So I think there's got to be some way, possibly with a statutory change or maybe with a constitutional referral, that look, it doesn't stop you from running for sheriff or constable, but once you get into that position, you have whatever, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, something to complete this kind of stuff, because it makes no damn sense. Chiefs of police have to be peace officer certified. Everyone else does. It's just a public safety thing. So I would never try to prohibit someone from running if they weren't post certified, but to continue serving in a capacity as an elected sheriff or constable if they're refusing to do what's right and do like the basic sensible public safety stuff, that's an issue. And then the other issue that it sounded like my colleagues were interested in supporting, because we heard from Supervisor Scott on this, the fact that Arizona, and I don't have my like sheet. I don't think I have it with me, but Arizona is no, I don't. We are 49 out of 51, meaning states plus DC, in terms of having anti-public corruption statutes on the books. That's really bad. Right. Yeah. So if a public official is doing if there's a bribery situation, so bribery was one, and the second one is misuse of campaign funds. So it's like very, very, very narrow. So there are ways to hold elected, appointed government officials accountable if there's a case to be made, a credible case of a bribery situation, or if it's an elected official misusing, abusing, whatever, campaign funds. Those are the two very narrow ways that potentially a public corruption situation could actually be adjudicated. But that's it. There is and even Texas has significantly better laws against public corruption than we do in Arizona. That's just bonkers. There's no ethics board with subpoena power. There's, and what that means is the attorney general, even when they see this kind of thing happening, have to kind of go, there's no state law that makes this something we can charge unless there's bribery, basically. And that needs to be fixed. That's
absolutely.
That's not Republican or Democrat, right? That's just like our public officials.
Got to disagree there. Yeah. The United States Supreme Court has been significantly narrowing the scope of public corruption law for years now, and that under a Republican majority, I would have.
That is a very good point. It does seem to be, my colleagues who happen to be in the Republican side of things, the folks that they make judges, the folks that they put on the Supreme Court, the laws that some of their representatives like to put forward do seem to empower, enable, or make it harder.
Not to mention this president, has enriched himself by billions of dollars since he came into office, along with his cronies and friends and family.
And thereby resolved one of his lies. I don't believe he was actually a billionaire when he came into office.
Yeah, he certainly is.
So you know what? Points. We'll give you some points for now actually being a billionaire due to self-enrichment.
Mm-hmm. But what about all the fraud with Snap? But no, we'll have to bring.
That is this was Instagram scrolling, but because Arizona was so good at implementing our the new changes with the SNAP program, we've already lost over 400,000 people in the program in the state of Arizona, and that is impacting. It's food. For God's sake, it's food, and it's not thousands of dollars a month. It's like
yanking food out of babies' mouths. Quite literally.
Correct.
But we'll have to bring you back on to talk about the legislative analysis and a bunch of other stuff.
Sure.
So thank you.
There's a lot of stuff that is not the sheriff that we can talk about, and I'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for joining us today, Matt. Appreciate your time, and we'll be seeing you down the road.
Sounds good.